I'm here because I'm aware that this is City Road's 30th anniversary. I was a client at City Roads many, many years ago in the very early days, in the late 1970s. And I'm here really to talk about my life now and how it's changed since those very difficult times. My home life wasn't happy. People in my family weren't happy. Things were very depressing. And there was a big world out there which was full of hippies and drugs and peace and love. And I got involved in that. And it was another family for me, actually, at the beginning.
I know there's some people that come from families of alcoholism or addiction. I don't. I come from a stable, functioning family. My parents are still married today.
As a sort of young teenager, it was wildly glamorous and exciting to smoke a bit of dope here, take a bit of coke there.
I started off at school with smoking weed and cannabis and doing LSD. Then I got introduced to heroin.
I know women blame everything on their periods. My heroin use was down to a period pain. But actually I took it for a period pain initially. My boyfriend was a heroin user.
I was using cocaine, crack, cannabis, speed.
Well, I drank whilst I was at school, and I first took drugs not long after I left school. When I had a drink, initially, it allowed me to do things I couldn't do without it. I could speak to people, I could dance a little bit.
I did suffer a lot of physical problems, and then I was left with prescription drugs. I was in so much pain that I ended up taking street drugs as a supplement.
I didn't really know it at the time, but I was a very shy, nervous kid. And drugs changed that.
Bush. I snorted this line and it was mixed with what he called smack, and I was so naive then that I didn't know that smack was heroin. It was at that moment I felt that I knew what it was to be God, I knew what it was to feel complete, I knew what it was to be loved, I knew what it was to dream, and I knew what it was to not care about anything.
Even though my boyfriend was using every day, I thought I was not going to get caught out.
I like to think of myself as an alpha male, and I fast-tracked into full-on needle junkiedom, which took me from a very pleasant middle-class, upper-middle-class background in the country to living in a skip, a convertible skip, I might add. It had a rag top.
The first time that I was really aware, I think, was when he was involved in an accident. He was knocked down by a car and run over by another.
I have a memory of thinking, oh, it'll all be different now. I was soon taking barbiturates again, speed, acid, you know. I'd take anything, really.
I ended up using needles where I wasn't using needles before. Eventually my life, that's all my life was about. It was about getting the drugs, using the drugs, waking up being sick.
They changed, I suppose, when I started injecting, when I started using heroin, when my habit grew and grew. I was still very young, I was in my late teens, being used and manipulated by older people, becoming involved in crime and all that involved, being arrested.
I would commit crime, basically, taking and driving away, burglaries.
I think I had a mental compulsion and obsession which I was completely unable to fight.
I couldn't think for myself because I was really intoxicated.
A lot of people would say, oh, but you're tall, obviously good looking, you know, well educated, you have all these advantages in life. Not, I might add, that there were advantages at 4 in the morning when trying to score crack in Peckham.
When I remember the time when I was using drugs, how low I got, how disrespectful people were to me, how disrespectful I was to myself. That was me, that was my life.
2 weeks after I left him, I saw someone and they said, how have you been? I went, yeah, we've split up and I'm going to get clean now. And they said, well, maybe you better tell him because he hadn't even noticed that I'd gone. That's how mad the relationship was.
He hadn't been in contact for some time, and I phoned his company where he worked and spoke to the secretary and asked if she could help me. We got in touch with him again like that. And he looked so awful then, so bad.
I would phone up, I think, maybe once a year on New Year's Eve, wish a happy New Year, and being totally convinced that she didn't want to hear from me.
Sometimes I didn't hear from her for months. Never hear or speak to her, and she'd ring in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning. Mum, you've got to send me money, my drug dealer's going to kill me. And then the phone would go dead, and then it'd be another 2 or 3 months before I'd hear anything.
Waking up, phoning dealers, living on the streets, started injecting.
My first thought every morning was, what am I going to do today to get the money to use?
I would sit outside in the West End on cash point machines, watching Asians take money out of the cash point, asking them, you know, thinking, would they know my parents? Would they know my family?
There was a lot of violence. There were people on the streets trying to rip me off. There were other people trying to rip me off. I was a woman on my own, a young woman on my own. I was vulnerable, although I didn't see that.
I was at risk with drugs, you know, I was at risk with overdosing, I was at risk with making my health worse, I was at risk of meeting strangers, but I didn't think about the risk, I just wanted the drugs.
I think one of the best descriptions of rock bottom I ever heard was the realisation that my behaviour had deteriorated faster than I could lower my standards. I had been to jail. I'd been to jail for burgling my best friend. I'd been in court for stealing from my parents.
When people look at you, they just look at the outside, they don't look at what's inside, you know, and I don't even look what's inside. I just found myself. I couldn't even look in the mirror. You know, I didn't care what I looked like, you know. It was days when I would wake up and I would walk the street like I was a mad person.
This fella came in, dealer, who said I owed him money, and he stabbed me in the leg with a carving knife. And the next thing I was in King's College Hospital, and I got stitched up, and I had nowhere to go except back.
Doctors did in the past pronounce me dead.
I was so down in myself, you know, I was so down in myself, I wanted to die anyway, you know.
In the mornings I'd have to have a drink to stop the DTs before I could have the gear, to stop the withdrawal from the heroin, and then I'd take handfuls of Valium and drink all day and puff, and it was the pits.
I've just got to kill myself, and I didn't want to die. I just couldn't go on. I couldn't go on, keep doing it to myself, waking up and clucking and trying to get the money, and so I took a lot of drugs actually to overdose, and someone found me and took me to hospital. And they told me I've got to wait 3 days to see if I'm going to live or not. And I lay there, and it was 3 days I was lying in this hospital bed, just thinking, just waiting really, and not caring. That's the sad thing, I didn't care. And it weren't a cry for help, I didn't think there was an alternative to it. For 2 weeks after that, I was on a mission to get clean. And I went to the doctors really desperate, and I said, listen, I need help. When this receptionist walked past, And I just burst out crying. I went, oh, I don't know what to do. And I told her everything, this receptionist. And she said, come with me. And she took me up to this room upstairs and she gave me a phone. She goes, you just make any phone calls you need to make. And I phoned City Roads.
In the months leading up to City Roads, my life was horrible. The flat I lived in was a crack house. There were people coming to the door round the clock. I'd lost all choice. I'd lost all hope. It was only when I started bumping into a series of people who said to me, you need to phone this number.
I was in a very, very, very bad state. Mentally, physically, emotionally.
I was feral by the time I was going to City Roads. I didn't change clothes, I didn't have a change of clothes. I didn't speak to friends, I didn't care about myself.
I was advised to ring City Road as a crisis centre.
I used to very often end up in the casualty department at Charing Cross Hospital, wake up in the morning just lying on a floor. We just used to all get put in this basement floor and just left there. And I think one day I must have made my way up to the emergency accident and emergency unit, and somebody must have given me the number. I don't remember very well, but I remember making that phone call, and I remember people coming to collect me from the hospital, and that was the beginning, really. That was the beginning of my journey away from using. I think this must have been about 1978.
About 15 to 10 years ago, I rang City Roads. You could feel that they wanted to talk to you, they wanted to engage, they didn't want you to hang up, you know, because that could have been a life or death situation, you know.
I could remember that the person was very kind and seemed to be very understanding, and I wasn't used to that. And also seemed to be non-judgmental and not critical.
The word on the ground was, this place was cool, you'd get fed, you'd get looked after, and you'd get detoxed.
I was absolutely terrified. I'd never had any form of treatment. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what sort of people would be in a place like City Roads. For the first week, my bag stayed under my bed. I wouldn't unpack my clothes, so I could just grab it and run if I needed to get out of there.
The second morning I woke up and I went in and I had a shower. When I came out of the shower, there was a large mirror confronting me, and I was horrified by what I saw. It was like a skeleton, and I remember looking into my eyes, and it was like two black holes, and I kind of fell into my own eyes, and that stayed with me. I'll never forget that. I put on a stone in a week, and I thought I was unique. I now know that happens to quite a lot of people that go to City Roads. I'd seen myself physically become human again, you know, from what amounted to a corpse.
And I remember my first night there and actually just going to sleep, and for some reason I was on a camp bed. I don't know whether they managed to squeeze me in as an extra, but I was in a camp bed with other people and just going to sleep that night and feeling secure and feeling safe and almost feeling as if I'd arrived at home in some sort of way.
To be fair to City Roads, I was not a glowing success first time round. The sort of gaps that I went into City Roads, or the times that I put myself in their care, probably saved my life.
I've become so isolated and shut down. I found it very difficult engaging with staff, but staff came and talked to me and supported me.
I sort of started getting a bit of self-respect back, actually, and started to feel that I am worth this. I'm worth doing this. My life is worth having. After talking to the care team and that, they really sort of enforced that in me. Being in City Roads, it reminded me of who I was.
In City Road, it was talking about, yes, you want to get off drugs, then this is maybe the way we can help you.
I remember seeing Jackie, who used to work in the admissions, on the stairs one day. And she said she would speak to me about what was I going to do next. And that was the first time I really got an idea that there might be more to this process than just stopping taking drugs.
And I remember people talking about a future for me, which wasn't really something that I'd thought about before.
I'd always remembered being known for smiling, but I'd reached the point where somebody had said to me, "You never smile." So when I first sat with people laughing in City Roads, I was really aware of it.
It was a relief to know he was in there. And he was just sounding so much better. He was sounding so much better. It sounded, he had hope in his voice, I think.
You can feel in there that they really genuinely mean it. They're not just saying it because they're working there, but they really try to engage in that pain, you know, and that's nice. Hallelujah. I go to church every Sunday, and I've always been a musician. I've always wanted to, I've always had a passion for singing, and I went to university, and I'm glad that I can have hope in my life today, and I can know that I have a little bit of inner peace.
And I still have a great deal of affection for City Roads, even though it was such a long time ago. Because I really, really don't think that I'd be here today if that service hadn't been around for me then.
Alpish, I've got him back clean. Even going through difficult parts of his life, but still able to get through it without using, is just an achievement. You know, I have my family's trust back. They are so proud of me. And they've always said, "You've been a person who can achieve a lot." And I believe that today. Before I never. Today I can believe I can get to where I want in my journey.
I work in admissions a couple of days a week, and to be able to give that to someone to say, "We're going to bring you in," and every time, you know, I don't burst out crying or nothing, but every time I remember it. I remember it being said to me. You know, my life is really, really fantastic. It is. And City Roads has been a big part of me. It's been the main reason I got clean, and it's really supported me. It's encouraged me to get training, and it's been a massive part of my life, and it still is today. And I'll always be thankful to it.
I wouldn't have done it without being in touch with drug services and outreach teams, you know, people that understood where I was coming from.
Anyone in a similar situation, there is hope there. They shouldn't give up hope. There is hope and there's help there. And to take advantage of the help that is there, and their lives can change.
I've told them I'm going to live till I'm 100 and they're all going to have to look after me. I'm going to be extremely feisty and not very nice. And I want them, they're going to all be there for me.
We will. We will.
About 2 years ago, I was standing on a tube train going from A to B, doesn't matter. And I was right in front of this woman. And I looked at her and she looked at me, as the English do, slightly embarrassed. No recognition at all. A friend of mine was also on that tube, and he came up to me as we approached our tube stop and said, "Hey man, we're getting off at this station." I said, "Oh great." And as she heard my voice, her eyes lit up in recognition, and she looked shocked. She said, "Oh my God." She said, "I didn't recognise you." She recognised my voice, but the man that stood in front of her was not the guy she'd treated 3 or 4 years earlier. I think that's a real testament to what City Roads can do. When the nurse that took me in didn't recognise me 4 years later, I don't know of any other freely given to me, and it cost me to access city roads or the self-help groups that I go to, freely given experience that not only changed my life, but gave my kids back their dad, you know. Gave my ex-wives an ex-husband, someone to point the finger at again.
I have to stay indoors for a day to go by without me seeing people that have been through city roads that are leading successful lives. I see it daily, and I love it. It's fantastic.